I gave her a Hermes scarf, vintage, hand-picked, wrapped with care. She glanced at it, sneered, and said, "You deserve nothing." My husband stood there, silent. That was the first day I entered their world, his perfect family, their perfect lies. I smiled. I swallowed. I disappeared into the background like they wanted me to. But that scarf? It wasn't just silk. It was a promise, one she didn't open, one she would regret, because 3 years later, while she toasted herself at a charity gala, she saw me on the cover of Forbes. And suddenly, I wasn't invisible anymore. The car slowed to a crawl as we approached the gates, black iron twisted like thorns, opening to reveal a mansion that looked like it had never known silence. Marble columns, trimmed hedges. Even the air smelled curated. I adjusted the gift box on my lap, the Hermes scarf inside folded to perfection. It had taken me a week to find that one. Vintage, hand-stitched, a delicate swirl of burgundy and gold. It reminded me of autumn, of warmth, of the kind of elegance you hope people remember you for. Daniel reached over, gave my knee a reassuring squeeze. "She's intense, but she'll warm up. Just be yourself." I smiled and nodded, though neither of us seemed certain what yourself meant anymore. This was the first time I would meet his family since we married at City Hall last month. No wedding, no celebration, just signatures and silence. I had told myself it was fine. That love didn't need chandeliers. That family could be built from scratch. Inside, the house was colder than I'd imagined. Not in temperature, but tone. His mother, Eleanor Montgomery, stood at the top of the staircase like a painting that hadn't been touched in years. Pearl necklace, silk blouse, and eyes that scanned me as if calculating loss. She walked down slowly, deliberate, like every step was meant to remind me I didn't belong here. When I handed her the gift, her lips barely moved. "For you," I said. "Something I thought you'd like." She took the box without a word, opened it halfway, then dropped it on the nearest table without even glancing inside. "Cute," she said flatly, "but unnecessary. You don't need to buy your way in. You're already married to him after all." I didn't know what to say. Daniel cleared his throat but said nothing. The silence felt louder than any insult. Then she added, almost lazily, "You deserve nothing." The room didn't react, like they'd heard her say worse. Or maybe they agreed. I smiled. Not because I felt happy, but because I had been trained by life, by survival, to mask the sting. I smiled the way women do when they bleed inside, but aren't allowed to show it. Over dinner, no one asked me a single question. They discussed hedge funds, art auctions, and country club renovations. I nodded when appropriate, drank water, and learned to disappear. Days turned into weeks. I became a fixture in the house. Polite, invisible, digestible. Eleanor hosted garden luncheons and didn't include me. When I asked Daniel about it, he shrugged. "She's old-fashioned," he said. "Don't take it personally." But I did. How could I not? I applied to join the local women's network she chaired. I was denied twice, despite having better credentials than half its members. One evening, I overheard her say to a friend on the phone, "She's not one of us, sweet girl, but empty." Daniel never defended me, just told me to be patient, that they'd come around. He said it like faith, like mythology. So I started writing again. At night, in the study no one used, I wrote longhand. Not about them. Not exactly. I wrote about a girl trapped in a glass cage. People walked by her every day, complimenting the shine, the clarity, the craftsmanship. No one noticed she was inside, suffocating. I called it the velvet cage. At first, it was just therapy. But something strange happened when I posted the first excerpt online under a pseudonym. Strangers resonated. Women commented, shared, it spread, quietly, like fog. I didn't tell Daniel, didn't tell anyone. My secret became my oxygen. Each night I added more. The girl in the story stopped smiling. She began noticing the cracks in the glass. She imagined what it would take to break them. One morning, as Eleanor prepared for another charity gala, I saw the scarf again, still in its box, tossed beside old mail in the foyer. She'd never even opened it. It didn't hurt anymore. It confirmed what I already knew. I stopped waiting to be accepted. I started archiving everything: interactions, expressions, contradictions. I documented her hypocrisy with precision only a ghostwriter could manage. I wasn't just writing fiction anymore. I was building a mirror. And when the blog went viral, anonymously of course, I smiled again. But this time, it was real. I stopped trying to be seen. I started mastering how to vanish, gracefully, invisibly, surgically. To them, I was harmless, quiet, a background prop in their grand tableau. Eleanor began letting me sit in on her women's council meetings, an exclusive circle of old money wives who talked about philanthropy like it was a sport. They discussed donor strategies over mimosas, gossiping about lesser families and subtle power plays dressed as charity. I sipped, nodded, smiled. They called me sweet, soft, simple. No one asked what I did all day. No one noticed when I positioned my phone beneath the centerpiece on the table, recording everything. Over the next few months, I amassed hours of audio. Eleanor had her hands in more than 10 nonprofit ventures. But behind the polished mission statements, money was being funneled, laundered, redirected. One women's shelter received a $300,000 grant and spent it on property upgrades for a private club. And Daniel? He wasn't just passive. He was complicit. I overheard him late one night, whispering into his phone in the library, bragging about strategic trades made just before certain press releases dropped, insider trading, cloaked in charm. I didn't confront him. I didn't flinch. I watched, listened, and built my own syllabus. By day, I played the docile daughter-in-law. By night, I studied like a soldier preparing for war. Coding, boot camps, financial modeling, branding. I read venture capital case studies, subscribed to every indie publishing Substack I could find. Then came the name Eva Lane. She wasn't me, not directly. Eva was who I would have been if the world hadn't told me to stay small. She was sharp, unapologetic. She didn't ask for a seat. She built her own table. I launched a blog under her name. I poured everything into it. Essays about invisibility, quiet resilience, weaponized politeness. It wasn't a manifesto. It was a mirror, held up to every woman who had ever been told she was too much or not enough. It started slow. A few shares, a few DMs from strangers who whispered, "Thank you." Then a post titled, "The Gift They Never Opened," exploded. It was about the scarf, about Eleanor, about being discarded before you were even unwrapped. It went viral in under 72 hours. Eva Lane became a name, a voice, a whisper in boardrooms and brunches. She was anonymous, untouchable, and undeniable. A week later, an editor from Forbes Women emailed the blog. She didn't know who Eva was, but she wanted her to write a guest piece. I crafted every word of that essay like it was a key. Titled, "The Power of Being Overlooked," it became a firestorm. Women in finance, media, academia, everyone was quoting Eva Lane. I declined interviews, declined panels. But when they invited Eva to speak at a virtual summit, I said yes. With one condition: my voice would be digitally rendered, a faceless audio. The voice I chose was calm, low, deliberate, untraceable. I listened to myself speak about erasure, about constructing power from silence. It wasn't just a speech, it was a declaration. Rebecca Montgomery was no one. But Eva Lane? She was starting to shape a movement. I used the momentum to build a startup. Ghostwriting services for underrepresented female founders who struggled to get their voices heard. I curated writers, editors, marketers. I funded the whole thing anonymously using a shell LLC. And then, irony struck. At one of Eleanor's charity breakfasts, I overheard her gushing about Eva Lane. "She's brilliant," she told a senator's wife. "I think she should run for office. I share her pieces all the time." I froze, teacup midair, heart thundering. My fingers curled around the china like it was an anchor. She didn't know. She didn't know the woman she quoted at every brunch, the one she praised for her eloquence and vision, was the same girl she once told, "You deserve nothing." She reposted my Forbes article with the caption, "We need more voices like hers." I saved the screenshot and I smiled, not because it felt like revenge, but because I was finally, indisputably, real. The first time Daniel mentioned Ava Lane, he sounded amused. "She's everywhere lately," he said, scrolling through his phone. "Some anonymous woman talking about invisible power structures and gender economics. You'd like her. A little intense, but smart." I smiled over my coffee. "Maybe I've read her." He didn't look up. "I'm thinking of pitching her as a branding case study. She could be worth a fortune if someone manages her right. Real strategy behind her content." That's when I knew he wanted to use her, use me. He wasn't alone. Eleanor brought it up 2 days later, over a family dinner that felt more like a board meeting. "There's this fascinating nonprofit initiative," she said, cutting her steak with the kind of elegance that made violence look delicate. "Empowering women entrepreneurs. Discreet, impactful. I'm considering backing it." She didn't know I owned it. She didn't know the founder, listed in every document, pitch deck, and digital presence, was a fabricated identity. Madeline Voss, a woman who didn't exist beyond code, curated photos, and a flawless CV. I'd built Madeline the way they built people in this world. Beautiful, impressive, untouchable. Eleanor met her over a series of emails and encrypted Zoom calls with voice filters and deep fake visuals. Madeline had an Ivy League degree, an accent that hinted at transatlantic boarding schools, and a history of elite consultancy. She was everything Eleanor respected. Rebecca would have been disqualified on sight. I fed Eleanor the vision, bridging access between underfunded female founders and discrete capital networks. We used her language. We let her believe she was shaping the movement. She signed the check with a flourish and called herself a patron of modern feminism. Daniel invested too. He liked the metrics. He liked that other investors followed his lead. They had no idea. They were funding me. The same woman they had starved of dignity now held the strings, and they applauded every move. I kept the performance airtight, correspondence through burner accounts, legal shielding through layered shell cores. No slip, no leak, until the gala. The Future Forward Fund, our flagship investment arm, hosted its first recognition event for early partners and donors. It was high-profile, televised, and full of the same socialites who once called me forgettable. The keynote speaker was a surprise guest. No one knew until the final hour. When I walked onto the stage, the room stiffened. I wore red. Not the red of seduction, but of war, of rebirth. The lights hit my face. The crowd took a collective breath. Daniel's glass slipped slightly in his hand. Eleanor didn't blink, but her knuckles turned white against the clutch she gripped like a weapon. I stepped to the podium. "My name," I began, "is Rebecca Montgomery, and 3 years ago I was told I deserved nothing." Silence. I looked straight at Eleanor. She didn't move, couldn't. But I've come to understand that nothing is a blank page, a zero balance, a start. My voice didn't shake. I didn't cry. I'd already bled every emotion dry on pages they never read. I took the silence, I took the dismissals, I took every closed door and turned them into data, into frameworks, into blueprints. And when you couldn't see me, I watched you. A camera panned to the audience. Daniel looked pale. You invested in a dream you couldn't name. You believed in a woman you never saw. Tonight, I return the favor. I stepped back. Applause wasn't instant, but it came. Reluctant, rising, undeniable. Afterward, Eleanor left early. Daniel approached me backstage, his voice sharp, low. "What the hell is this? You lied to everyone." "No," I said. "I built everything you wouldn't let me build in my name. You manipulated us. "No," I said again. "I outgrew you." He tried to pull funding. His lawyers threatened breach of contract. But the legal frameworks I'd spent 2 years constructing held. The board sided with me. Public opinion did the rest. And when a journalist asked if I had anything to say to the people who once doubted me, I answered plainly, "You gave me nothing. I built everything." The clip was never supposed to resurface. It had been buried in an old phone, deep in the archive folder, forgotten even by me. A moment too small to matter back then, just a blurry living room, my voice soft, her voice sharp. "You deserve nothing." Eleanor's words cut through the screen like a scalpel. The clip was only 12 seconds, but it hit the internet like a siren. I didn't post it. I never needed to. The universe, or perhaps karma, had better timing than I ever did. The video leaked through a fan account tracing the roots of Eva Lane's voice to anonymous feminist literature. They connected the dots, drew the arrows, and then they found me. The post went viral in under a day. Hashtags trended. "You Eva Lane unmasked. You silent architect. See, she deserved everything." Screenshots flooded timelines of the scarf, the gala, my speech, of Eleanor's frozen expression and Daniel's retreating figure. They dissected everything, my silence, my patience, my rise. I became a symbol, not for rage, but for strategy, for how to win without shouting, for how to rebuild from nothing. Eleanor, once a bored darling, became a cautionary tale. Investigations launched into her nonprofits, numbers that didn't add up, grants that vanished, shelters that never existed. Her name disappeared from the gala invitations. Her seat at the club went on pause. Her reputation crumbled the same way she had tried to crumble me, quietly, cruelly, irreversibly. Daniel lasted a little longer. He tried to pivot to frame himself as blindsided, used, but emails leaked. Careless messages sent in private group chats mocking my blog, joking about my whisper war. Investors pulled out, his firm forced him out. His name faded from plaques and portfolios. I didn't make a statement, not to the press, not on social media. I let silence do what it always had, speak for me. Instead, I focused on building, not revenge, not retaliation, a system, a network, a blueprint for women like me who wanted to start loud fires from quiet pain. We expanded. What began as a writing service became a full ecosystem. Anonymous mentorships, ghostwriting incubators, storytelling grants for women trapped in image cages. No names required, no resumes demanded, just truth, cloaked in art. We called it the Silent Architect Initiative, and then came the letter. It arrived in a plain envelope, no return address, handwritten on ruled paper in crooked teenage script. "I don't know if this will reach you. I only just found out your real name, but I had to try." I sat alone in my office, the city skyline pulsing behind me. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. "I'm 16. My stepfather is like your husband used to be, except mine hits harder. My mom says I imagine things, but I read your essay, the one about how the girl in the glass cage started breathing through cracks. I printed it, hid it under my mattress. I read it every night, because if you made it out, maybe I can too. You don't know me, but you saved me. Thank you." I read it again, then again, and again. That night I couldn't sleep, not from pain, but from purpose. The next morning, we registered a new foundation, Red Thread. Its mission was clear, to find the girls who had been told to shut up, calm down, stay quiet, the ones who had been told they deserved nothing. We'd give them therapy, mentorship, legal aid, financial escape plans. We would not wait until they became entrepreneurs. We would save them when they were still survivors. The name came from folklore, how red threads tie souls across lifetimes. I didn't want to be a savior. I just wanted to be the hand that untied knots. Within 6 months, the Red Thread Foundation was operating in 3 cities, anonymous applications only. No photos, no interviews, just stories. Stories like mine. Stories no one had listened to before. Then came the call. The assistant said the producer was from a major streaming platform. He'd read every post under Eva Lane, watched the gala speech a dozen times. He thought there was something cinematic in it, not just the twist, not just the justice, but the architecture of it all. The way silence had become the plot. "We want to tell the story," he said. "On your terms. You control the narrative." I didn't answer immediately. I walked to the window, looked out at the skyline that had once mocked me. I thought about that girl in the glass cage, how she used to wonder if anyone would ever notice the scratches she left behind. Now the world had seen them, and they called them blueprints. When I turned back, I asked the producer only one thing. If we do this, the story can't end with the revenge. It has to end with the beginning. He paused, then said, "That's exactly what we hoped you'd say." It started with a hashtag, not one I created, not one I supported, one that crawled out of the darkest corners of the internet. Architect of Deceit. It wasn't clever, but it spread fast, a coordinated smear campaign from a coalition of anti-feminist influencers who claimed my entire persona was a hoax, a manipulation strategy crafted to vilify men and profit from outrage. They called me a master of media puppetry, a liar, a fraud. At first I laughed, or tried to, but then came the screenshots, doctored emails, misleading clips from interviews, proof that I had faked abuse, proof that I had used my husband's connections to rise, then betrayed him for sympathy points. The most damaging claim that Eva Lane was not just a pen name, but a persona I used to mislead investors and skirt regulations. The stock price of Silent Architect Inc. dropped overnight. Partner companies pulled out, worried about optics. Red Thread's donors demanded clarity, and me, Rebecca Montgomery, was suddenly a liability. I knew the strategy. Undermine the storyteller, cast doubt, and the whole story collapses. Still, nothing prepared me for the sting when I found the source of the breach. Amelia, my executive assistant. I had trusted her with everything. Calls, contracts, calendars. She had the passwords. She had access. She had, as it turned out, been working for Daniel the entire time. He hadn't disappeared like the rest of them. No, Daniel had been waiting, watching. And now he wanted the one thing I couldn't let him take: my name. He showed up at my office uninvited, wearing the same expensive jacket from our first date. "You've made quite the empire," he said, looking around. "But we both know it's built on a story, on smoke." I didn't respond. "I'm offering you a chance," he continued. "You let me help reshape the public narrative. We go back to the truth, mutual respect, breakdown of the marriage, your emotional retreat. Nothing dramatic. We protect the brand." "My brand doesn't need protection," I said. "It needs the truth." He tilted his head. "Rebecca, if I go public, if I show how you crafted this whole thing to destroy a family, to rise like a phoenix from ashes you lit, do you think your precious initiative survives?" I didn't flinch. "I'll take my chances." So he sued me for defamation, for breach of trust, for fraud. The headlines were predictable. Ex-husband of silent architect, breaks silence. Interviews, think pieces, panel discussions. I countersued, and I fought. But the cost was everywhere. My inbox turned violent. My team fractured. My name, once sacred, now sparked debate. Was I a pioneer or a performance? And worst of all, when the lights turned off and the rooms emptied, I was alone. Truly, for the first time. I stopped sleeping, ate in silence, walked into meetings hollowed out. Even Red Thread began to feel like someone else's dream. I had poured so much of myself into being a symbol that I had lost track of the woman who started it all. Then came the night of the Impact Women Awards. I was nominated for Lifetime Influence. I should have felt proud. I should have felt triumphant. But backstage, before I was called up, I stood in front of a full-length mirror in a gold gown custom designed for the moment. And I didn't recognize myself. My eyes were sharper, my skin tighter, my spine straighter, but none of it looked like home. Was this the cost of power? Was this what it meant to win? After the ceremony, alone in my hotel room, I found a letter tucked under my suite door. No name, just cursive writing on the envelope, familiar in a way that made my throat tighten. I opened it slowly, carefully, as if it might vanish. Rebecca, I watched the gala tonight. You looked unstoppable, and I am sorry it took me this long to tell you where you come from. I am your mother, the one who left, the one who disappeared into nothingness. I left because I didn't know how to stay. I was 19, and your father was the first man who told me I mattered, until he didn't, until his love came with bruises and silence. I stayed too long. I left too late. And when I looked at you, so small and pure, I thought the only gift I could give you was escape. I was wrong. Watching you now, I see what I stole from both of us, but I also see you turned that absence into legacy. You remind me of who I wanted to be. Love, M. I cried, not out of grief, but out of recognition. For the first time in months, I felt human again. The first sentence came easily. They never opened the gift, but I wrapped it anyway. That line sat at the top of the page for 3 days before I added a second, then a third. I wrote without an outline, without strategy, just truth, raw and unfixed. I wrote at sunrise before the world could argue with me. I wrote in silence, in sweatpants, in a rented cabin so far from the city even GPS gave up. The book was never meant to be a bestseller. I didn't care about lists or reviews or launch parties. This wasn't about reclaiming image or redeeming legacy. It was about release, about finality. I called it The Gift They Never Opened. It wasn't a memoir in the traditional sense. It was a collage of voices. Mine, Eva's, the girl in the cage, the woman at the gala, the architect who built without blueprints. I wrote it for every version of myself I'd ever had to bury just to be taken seriously. The publishers expected something fierce, something burning. What they got was quieter, slower, but deeper. It sold anyway, not because of marketing, but because people were ready to read it, to see themselves between its lines, to find echoes of their own unfinished stories. A week after the release, Netflix called. Again. This time, the deal was bigger, global. They wanted adaptation rights, docuseries, spin-offs, panels. They offered creative control, a seat at every table. I declined. Not because I was angry, not because I didn't appreciate the reach, but because the world already had enough screens. What it needed was mirrors, and I'd already built mine. I made one final appearance. A live interview streamed to over 2 million viewers. No makeup, no lighting, no script. When the journalist asked what I wanted my legacy to be, I paused. Then I said, "Some cages are invisible. I just built the key." It became the quote that followed me, tattooed on wrists, printed on posters, painted across walls in girls' shelters. But after that night, I disappeared. No red carpets, no interviews, no more platforms. I stepped out of the light I had earned and let it fall on others. And for 10 years, I was just Rebecca again. The plaza was quiet that morning. Too early for tourists, too late for the city's usual rush. A girl, no older than 20, stood before a sculpture taller than herself. It was abstract, a looping spiral of metal and glass, coiling into itself like a question without an answer. At its base, a plaque read, "Eva Lane, Architect of Echoes." For those who were told they deserved nothing. She stared for a long time, as if waiting for the art to blink first. Her fingers brushed the edge of the plaque. She wore a threadbare hoodie and carried a sketchbook under one arm. A single braid fell over her shoulder. "Do you think she was real?" she asked, barely more than a whisper. A voice answered behind her, soft, rasped with time. She was every girl who was ever made to feel invisible. She just learned how to draw attention by disappearing. The girl turned. A woman stood nearby, gray hair twisted in a low bun, lines etched deep at the corners of her mouth. She wore no name tag, no camera, just presence. The girl studied her. But who was she really? The older woman smiled gently. She was the woman who walked away from applause, who wrote when no one was listening, who stayed quiet long enough to hear everyone else. She sounds lonely. Not lonely, the woman replied. Just free. The girl glanced down at her sketchbook. I wanted to draw something for her, but I don't know what she looked like. You don't need to, the woman said. She never looked the same twice. They stood in silence together. A bird landed on the edge of the sculpture, then flew off again. Finally, the girl asked, Do you think she'd be proud of me? The woman placed a hand on the girl's shoulder. Her skin was warm, her grip steady. I think she already is. As the girl sat on the edge of the fountain to sketch, the woman walked slowly toward the far end of the plaza. She paused only once to run her fingers along the spine of a book someone had left at the sculpture's base. It was old, edges worn. The gift they never opened. She smiled, then kept walking. And when the crowd began to gather an hour later, school groups, tourists, mothers with strollers, there was no sign of her. Only the echo of a presence that didn't need a name to be remembered.